This episode of Sportish is sponsored by the Active Industry First Start Traineeship program, funded by the Queensland Government.
Hello and welcome to Sportish, where we look at life through the lens of sport. I am Libby Trickett.
And I am Georgie Trickett. And Lib, over the summer holidays, which feels like a really distant memory right now.
A possible millennium ago.
Did that even happen? But over those summer holidays, the ABC released the results of a survey they did of current and former elite female athletes. And I have to admit, I actually haven't stopped thinking about it ever since.
Yeah, it's so interesting and amazing how it all came about as well.
So to help us understand why we needed this survey and what it all means, we have another guest in the studio today.
We're loving guests at the moment.
Oh, and I'm excited about this one. Amanda Shalala is a distinguished journalist and broadcaster who brings over 2 decades of experience to her role as the deputy editor of ABC Sport. Can we just take a minute?
That's awesome.
And celebrate the fact that a deputy editor at ABC Sport is female.
Yes, we love that.
Bloody awesome. She's particularly recognised for her advocacy in elevating women's sport and championing diversity, often reporting at the intersection of elite performance and significant social issues. Amanda's exceptional storytelling ability means that she's been part of the ABC's coverage of major international events like the Olympic and Paralympic Games.
Little known.
And we are thrilled to be talking to her in the Sportish studio today.
Amanda, before we jump into the reporting that you've obviously been doing around women's sport, we wanted to ask you about your own relationship with sport and how that looks in your everyday life.
I was super sport obsessed as a kid. At one stage, I thought, maybe I'll play for the Hockey Roos because I really loved my hockey. But it quickly became apparent I didn't have the talent or really the desire to put in all the hard work and the effort and the training. And I was like, oh, hang on. You can do a thing where you watch all the sport and talk about it and report about it. So I think from being a fan, the leap wasn't too far to then think about, okay, I want to be a sports journalist. So that started pretty young for me. In my early high school years, that's when I thought, okay, if I love watching it so much and playing it as well, then maybe I could make a career out of it. So I'd say my first loves in terms of being a fan were cricket, rugby league, Olympics, Paralympics, like the big time stuff, football as well. And some of the greatest moments of my life still to this date are very much linked with big sporting events that I attended as a fan, like the Sydney Olympics, like seeing the Socceroos qualify for the 2006 World Cup, Steve Waugh's famous last ball ton at the SCG. A lot of them, to be honest, outside of Olympic and Paralympic sport, very much linked with men's sport because that's what I had the most exposure to.
That's what we all had access to at the time.
Exactly. But as I've moved through my career, it's very, very different now, and I'm grateful for that. But definitely a fan through and through is how I started out.
We mentioned at the top that the ABC and Deakin University recently polled current and former elite female athletes across the country. Where did the idea for this survey come from?
I'll give full credit here to our friends at the BBC. So they have conducted something similar. They've done a few iterations of it over the past few years called the BBC Elite British Sportswomen's Study. And the idea for them was to survey the experiences of elite athletes across the UK and then share the results and also some breakout stories to come from that. So since we are a fellow broadcaster, a public broadcaster like them, I thought, okay, that's a really cool idea. I like that. Often we're waiting for the academics to do the research and then we're reactive to that and we report on it. I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we can generate the research ourselves and then report on it? We have the exclusive access to the data and then to the athletes as well. So the BBC was really helpful in my initial conversations, in talking to them, figuring out how they did it. And then we wanted to put our own mark on it and do it in our own way. So we definitely wanted to do it in an Australian context and to not necessarily copy and paste what they had did, took inspiration from some of their questions. But then the unique element that we added in was talking to Deakin University as well. And we thought, they do this day in, day out. So let's partner with a university so they can advise us along the way. They helped us formulate the survey. They helped us every step of the way, although it was very much driven by us. And the exciting thing now is that they are taking all that data and research and the interviews that we've done, and they're going to produce their own academic article on it. So it's kind of the reverse of what usually happens, but I think it's really valuable to have this wide-scale study to give some insight into experiences of elite athletes in Australian women's sport, with the caveat, it's not representing everyone. We got 152 athletes across 47 sports. So we're not here saying this is definitively the experience of everyone in women's sport, but I think it's a really good snapshot and quite a large number of athletes compared to the population subset within Australia. And from the academics we spoke to, they said this is a very good turnout and a pretty large number compared to what they might get for their academic studies.
I think it's absolutely incredible, this entire concept. What was it for you that most surprised you about the survey outcomes?
I think the commonality of a lot of experiences across so many different sports and across different types of athletes as well. So we had athletes at the very top end, medal winning Olympians, Paralympians, those playing in the elite professional football codes in Australia, to those in smaller niche sports. But there were so many elements where they had very similar experiences, I would say, with things like coaching. I found that a really strong thread that came through. We know that most sport is male-dominated when it comes to coaching. That's no surprise. But what was more interesting is the impact that then has on the athletes, some of the very real consequences that can have on them, because a lot of them said, I do not feel comfortable sharing personal health information, or the way that male coaches may communicate with female athletes. Has to be different to the way they may communicate with male athletes. And sometimes that nuance isn't there and the female athletes suffer because of it. Or sometimes there's very black and white thinking about, okay, you need to lose 10 kilos, and it's very blunt in the delivery, but that can spiral into very serious mental and physical health consequences. So I think those sorts of things were really fascinating around women's health as well. Again, the commonality of experiences there. It doesn't matter if you're an elite swimmer or if you're an elite roller derby athlete. There were many similarities in that space as well. So I think while we often highlight the differences, there were a lot more things in common across these different areas we looked at, which was discrimination, health and well-being, safety, resourcing, women's health. A lot more in common than there were differences.
I want to pick up on that thread of discrimination because I was fascinated to learn, and I think we need to call it out, that still over a third of respondents had experienced gender or sexuality-based discrimination. What were the statistics there?
Sometimes it was unconscious bias, or what you might call like casual discrimination, not to underplay it at all, but that's how it may be perceived in terms of sexual harassment from the people that we spoke to in particular. So we did the survey and then we followed up and did a lot of interviews. I would say that was probably amongst the more common experiences was around sexual harassment. So that is things like inappropriate comments, degrading women in sporting contexts. And this largely, from what we heard, I'm not saying this is happening everywhere, but from what we heard, largely coming from male coaches or coming from male teammates if it's a mixed gender sport or a mixed team environment. So that was one thing which can be really insidious. It can be laughed off and brushed aside. Like, it doesn't matter if you're just saying these little comments. But when that piles up and it's said again and again and again, that can really wear people down. I'm sure many women can relate just in any facet of society. There definitely was the more serious scale as well, which I would say was not as common, but really horrific, where we heard instances of sexual assault and violence against women, which was really hard to read some of the comments and to talk to some of the people anonymously about it as well. And some of them told us that they reported the action and nothing happened. And this was something we did a breakout story on gender-based violence in women's sport and how often the reporting mechanisms is what is letting these athletes down, because either they don't know where to go, or when they do go somewhere for help, the system is so hard to navigate and so complex that they just give up or they don't get a satisfactory result in the end. So the next time they think, why bother? I spoke to one athlete who just said, there's no point in me reporting anything because the people I'm reporting to are mates with the people I'm complaining about. So what's the point? So these are very serious issues that we heard of. Again, not widespread necessarily in terms of it's happening everywhere all the time, but to even happen once, that's too much. And it's definitely happening more than that.
Yeah, you can definitely still see there's a long way to go in lots of areas of women's sport. What I find really interesting is I think in our culture now we are talking a lot more about women's health and hormones and menstruation and periods and tampons and all those sorts of things, which is wonderful. But the results of the survey showed that actually 85% of athletes don't think there's enough education around women's health for athletes, and 75% have experienced menstrual irregularities and nearly half are experiencing eating disorders. From my perspective, these sorts of results are incredibly disturbing still, particularly when you think about all of the health benefits that sport is meant to be bringing us and we kind of elevate our athletes as the peak of health. What does that translate to for these young women who are experiencing these things, especially, as you said, when the coaching system is dominated by men and they don't necessarily feel comfortable talking about these issues?
I think a lot of it is really about challenging how we perceive health, particularly in a sporting context. So I think things are changing. They're definitely changing from the athletes we've spoken to, but they're still not at the point they should be. So, for example, this idea of thinner is better. The lower the body fat percentage, the better you're going to be as an athlete. We know so much of that has been dispelled now because athletes can break down with injuries, with serious health consequences if they're not fueling enough. There's relative energy deficiency in sport syndrome, which means if you are not eating enough for the amount of energy that you're putting out, you could lose bone density, which can lead to osteoporosis, fractures, stress fractures, those sorts of things. It can lead to you losing your period, which means it affects your fertility, but it affects your overall health as well, your immunity, so many different things. So I think one of the athletes that we spoke to, who's a rhythmic gymnast, Alexandra Kiroi-Bogatreva, she was happy to go on the record and share her story with us. She had a really interesting insight to share with us, and that she didn't get her first period until she was 19. She's only 24 now, so she's still very young. This wasn't like decades ago. This is just a few years ago is when she got her first period, when on average, Australian girls will be getting their period around the age of 12. And so she didn't realise there was something wrong with that. She kept getting stress fractures, didn't know what was going on. She was always feeling so tired and fatigued and getting injured a lot and just kept pushing through. Eventually, she was able to link up and get some good advice. And her doctor told her, you're malnourished. And that's stunning to think of an elite athlete who's been to an Olympics, Commonwealth Games, is malnourished. It's a real slap in the face. And she's not the only one. There were a lot that told us, it was seen as healthy and a good thing if you didn't get your period. If you didn't have your period, it meant you were training really hard and you're giving it your everything. So good on you, when we know all the medical advice says there are red flags if you are either not getting your period at all or if it is irregular, if there are serious abnormalities with it. So while we often look at the very severe health consequences, even something like that, which may not seem so serious as losing your period, can raise a lot of issues. And so I think that one was fascinating to come out of it. And then a lot of the athletes told us they're on the pill. I think it was around 40%. And that can bring a whole host of issues too, because they told us often a coach said to them, okay, let's just solve the period issue. We'll put you on the pill. But of course, it just masks any problems you may have because you're not having a natural cycle. And so then when they come off the pill and they might want to try to have a child, they realize, oh, hang on a minute, I can't actually get pregnant because I'm not ovulating regularly, or it's masking other health issues as well.
That's exactly what happened to me as an athlete. I was put onto the pill at the age of 16, skipped the sugar pills, never regularly got my period, didn't really understand my cycle until probably the age of 41, which I am now, which is disturbing to think that is still going on to this day.
And we've just got to talk about it. It's not embarrassing. So I should say there are a lot of like great men in sport too. I don't want to be here saying like all the men in sport are bad. There are a lot of great men who are in the coaching and leadership positions leading the way, a lot of great women too. That's what we need. Everyone coming together to get rid of these taboos to best support the athlete. And the other thing I hope that comes from this survey and just more wider conversations around all of these issues is to make more of an impact in society. This is not just about sport. I'm very passionate about the capacity of sport to create real world change. And so if we have these conversations, when it's someone like you, Libby, sharing your experiences, that strikes a chord with the wider audience. And there's a woman or gender diverse person out there who is not an athlete, but at least they can relate to you or they can relate to these athletes and think, oh, hang on. Oh, okay, so it's not normal to just not have a period. Maybe I should check that out. Or, okay, I'm not alone in experiencing this type of discrimination. I should follow up.
I think it's also really exciting the trickle-down effect that this has if we're talking about elite athletes, but this also has such a great flow-on effect for community sport. We know that these conversations happening at the elite level have such relevance to our teen girls particularly, and for them to be hearing them is so important. Hey, Libby.
Hey, Georgina.
Have you heard about the Active Industries First Start Traineeship program?
Is that the one where you get $20,000 wage subsidy for not-for-profit clubs and organisations?
Totally. I thought this was just wild and I didn't know that this existed, and I can already think of so many clubs that could benefit from this. This is a bit of money that you can use to bring someone on who's not just a volunteer. They're actually an employee of your club to help you get all the things done that you need to get done.
And are they the people who kind of haven't been in work for a while, so it helps them return to work as well?
It can be, or it can just be you converting a volunteer into somebody who can do all the doing.
Because that's the thing, in all of these sorts of organisations, it relies so much on volunteers and people are so busy. And they need to be able to put together these things that help organisations take it to another level.
We want people in clubs to be able to rely on somebody to print out the spreadsheets, to organise the websites so that the people who are volunteering can get out on the court or on the field and do what they do best.
Basically, people can take advantage and all they need to do is submit an application and AQIA can actually help you with that. So head to the website or click the link in the show notes. Take advantage of this incredible opportunity.
Amanda, we know from working with organisations like the Wattle Nest that nearly half of all elite athletes are living below the poverty line. What did this survey identify when it came to women and income in sport?
This one was maybe a little bit surprising for us because we know women in sport are generally underpaid and paid much less than men, but it was really stark from what we found. We found 39% don't earn any money from sport. And again, there's a big range. I'm not just talking about people who are in very niche, small sports where you wouldn't expect them to make money. As I mentioned before, there are people in top shelf sporting environments. 36% earn between $5,000 and $20,000 annually. So that's well below the minimum wage. We spoke to quite a few athletes around this topic. I've spoken to several Winter Olympians about it. Again, you think Olympian or Paralympian, but particularly Olympians, you think, okay, they're raking it in. They're doing all right. But again, as you would know very well, that's not the case. And we heard so many of them say, unless you are in that very, very top tier of maybe like the one or two, the handful of very recognisable Olympians or Paralympians with a great story to sell, so to speak, then you're not making any money from the sport. Outside of that, there are people who were couch surfing, they're selling their car, they were working multiple jobs just to try and get by. And there were others who were just reconsidering whether they would even stay in their sport at all. We spoke to Mel Kawa, who is now a retired rugby union player. She started when the Super W started up, which was a few years ago, where they were being paid nothing. And now they're at a situation where it's a short season. It goes for a couple of months and most are being paid maybe $5,000 to $8,000 for that season, which is still not much progress from when she started. And she said that's really disheartening to see because she wants to see the sport grow and wants girls like her to see that there are opportunities in that sport. We spoke to Amy Medwin, who plays in the A-League women's competition. We know how far the Matildas have come, the benchmarks they've set, what they've done. But they are the elite few when it comes to women's footballers in Australia. The A-League women are not fully professional. Their minimum wage is around $26,000 and the average wage is not much more than that. They have been crying out to become fully professional since the Women's World Cup. And they're saying if we don't get there, then we're going to have to walk away from the sport. Then what happens to the Matildas? Because that's the pipeline. Every single current Matilda has gone through the A-League women's competition. And so I think these are serious conversations to have. Most of the women we spoke to are not necessarily saying, okay, we need to earn the multi-millions to be exactly the same as where the men are at. But if you expect us to perform like professionals, then you have to pay us so we can train and perform to that capability.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like we've made so much progress in so many ways. You know, just recently we saw the women's first State of Origin game, which outperformed the men's AFL on the same night, which is just incredible to see. But there's still this gap in the perception versus the reality, I think, of how female athletes are having to live and having to, you know, put their lives on hold or, you know, really not make money outside of their sport or have to seek out making money outside of their sport. And the fact that women's sport is actually incredibly popular and people want to watch it.
And there's always this line that, okay, yeah, we'll put more money into it or we'll put it more on prime time or cover it more once there are more people watching or once there's more investment. But that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy is how do you get there without the initial broadcast, without the investment? So I think if you look at women's cricket, for example, like Cricket Australia has done a really good job with the investment they've put with the Australian women's cricket team. They stumped up a lot of cash before the women's cricketers were really making any money or drawing eyeballs or drawing bums on seats. And now you see where they are. They have come so far. Or the Matildas and the pay deal that they struck a few years ago with the collective bargaining agreement, which sees them get an equal share of revenue compared to the Socceroos. So if you invest in it, it will come, but you can't just sit and hope that magically it's going to happen overnight. Maybe it's a long game. You might not see any returns for quite a while, but it definitely will come. The appetite is there. And if you're just forgetting about 50% of the population, just from like a business sense, like it doesn't really make a lot of sense from a business perspective if you're alienating 50% of your market.
Deloitte just reported that the women's sports market will exceed $3 billion in 2026 and noted that much of the growth in women's sport is currently coming from North America. Based on the survey results that we've just spoken about, what do you think Australia needs to do to make sure we're not only improving the standards, but we're getting a slice of this economic pie?
I think just believe in it and play the long game. As I said, you can't just think it's going to happen overnight. Men's sport, when you're looking at professional men's sport particularly, that has been building for well over 100 years. The early iterations of what is now the NRL and AFL started in the early 1900s. So do we want to wait that long for the women to get there as well? We don't have a 1900s mentality anymore. Let's move with the times. You need to put that cash in, put that investment in, back them, show them you are valuable, you are worth something, because again, the ripple effects go far beyond sport. Some people dismiss it like it's just sport. It doesn't really matter. We should put money in hospitals and schools. And of course, those things are super important. Of course, we should be investing in that, but it doesn't have to be one or the other, because when you invest in sport and in women's sport, you show others out there what is possible. Not just girls, not just women, as we have seen from like the Australian women's cricketers or the Matildas. It can really galvanise a whole country. It's important for social cohesion. It's important for gender equity, for showing everyone out there what is possible for anyone, no matter who you are, where you come from, looking at broader intersectionality as well. When you see the captain of the Australian women's football team, Sam Kerr, who is not a white woman, that is really impactful for people who come from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. Like myself, even me, I'm older than Sam Kerr, but it's inspiring for me to see people like her, Mary Fowler, and to think that, wow, okay, they're really shattering expectations of what you can do no matter where you come from. Again, parasport. I love Paralympic sport. And I think that is really grossly underinvested in and undercovered from a media perspective too. Because how incredible is that when you see people achieving something seemingly impossible? It gives you so much more than just a win or a loss in sport. It can really change people's lives and change public perception and make real differences around conversations around accessibility and those sorts of things. So not to be like too idealistic and like sport.
No, please, as idealistic as possible, please. This is the stuff we froth on.
Amanda, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. We've absolutely loved learning more about this survey. We will put links to the amazing reporting that's come out of it. And we're so grateful to you and the ABC and to Deakin University for undertaking this work and this research.
It's so important.
And continuing it because, like we said before, not only will it help our female athletes at the elite level, but it's also going to help our girls and teens who are coming up through sport, regardless of what their level of relationship with sport is.
Thank you so much, Georgie and Libby. I love speaking about this, as you know, and I'm a really big fan of what you're doing with Sportish. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. What I love about this whole thing, George, is that Amanda saw something that was happening overseas. She decided to bring it to Australia with the ABC and obviously Deakin University. And I'm sure some people are like, oh, but why do we even need to know these kinds of things? Why do we need to know this information? Why is this research necessary? Why put time and effort and money into it? And the thing is that like if you're sticking your head in the sand and going, oh, but women's sport is doing well and we're everywhere now and we're broadcasting all sorts of games and sports now, then you can't actually make a tangible shift for female athletes. And as we know now from the research that was done, that there is still such a long way to go.
I think it's incredible that this research had never been done before in Australia. That's probably the thing that blows my mind the most. And how important it is to have these conversations and to facilitate these conversations and for sports to stop and go, oh, we thought we were on top of this whole sexual discrimination thing, but clearly we're not.
And as well, you know, my daughter is having those let's chat.
Mortify tweens.
Oh, absolutely mortified tweens about, you know, body and physiology and periods and all of those sorts of menstrual cycles. And I never had that growing up, right? So you kind of think we're taking steps forward across the board for women's health and hormones and all of those sorts of things. But again, the research shows that we're still so far behind in how we can help not just female athletes, but the community as a whole in helping with all of these elements that was discovered in this research.
Yeah, and I think as well, the research that's coming out now through the ABC and Deakin University and these survey results, it also supports some of the existing research around how women and girls find fun in sport. So we've spoken about this a lot, this idea that what girls perceive as fun is different to what boys perceive as fun. And it often has to do with the type of coaching and the environment they're in. And that fun element is so crucial to understanding how we keep girls playing sport.
That lifelong love of sport. It's so true. I love that chat with Amanda. She's amazing.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Sportish. You can find us on all your podcast apps and on YouTube and on Spotify video.
All the exciting things, all the mediums now.
We are everywhere.
And don't forget to check us out on @beingsportish. Share this.
Send it to your coaches.
Send it to your coaches. Review it. We'd love all of those sorts of things. If you have any interesting thoughts or conversations that you want us to tackle, make sure you head to our DMs or email us. Otherwise, it will be in your ears next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.
This episode of Sportish is sponsored by the Active Industry First Start Traineeship program funded by the Queensland Government.